Welcome to the channel Reveal Penny USA, and before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what I am about to share with you today is going to completely change the way you look at the loose change sitting in your coin jar, your car cup holder, or even that forgotten pile of pennies on your dresser, because we are talking about a coin, a simple, small, copper penny. The kind most people toss aside without a second thought, the kind that gets lost in couch cushions and forgotten in parking lots, and yet, this specific penny, this 1960 Lincoln Penny, has been valued at an absolutely jaw-dropping, mind-blowing, life-changing $44 million, yes, you heard that correctly, $44 million, for a single penny, and I know what you are thinking that is impossible, that has to be a mistake, that no penny in the entire history of American coinage could ever be worth that kind of money, but I am here to tell you today that not only is it possible, it is real, it has happened, and the most terrifying and exciting part of this whole story is that one of these pennies, right now, at this very moment, could be hiding somewhere in your home, in your wallet, in a collection passed down from a grandparent, just waiting to be discovered, so do not move, do not click away, because we are just getting started, and I promise you, by the time we are done today, you are going to look at every single penny you ever touch in a completely different way. And if you think the 1960 penny is going to blow your mind, just wait, because we have more incredible coins coming up in today's video that are going to leave your jaw on the floor, coins with stories so unbelievable, values so outrageous, and history so dramatic that you absolutely cannot afford to miss a single second of what is coming, so stay with me, lock in, and let us dive deep into the extraordinary, almost unbelievable world of the 1960 Lincoln Penny worth $44 million. Now, to truly understand why this coin is so outrageously valuable, we need to go back in time, all the way back to 1960, a year that was already filled with monumental moments in American history, a year when the world was changing rapidly, when the space race was heating up, when a young John F. Kennedy was about to make history, when America was buzzing with energy and uncertainty all at once. And right in the middle of all of that incredible historical tension, the United States Mint was busy doing what it always does, producing millions upon millions of pennies to keep the economy moving, and in 1960, the Lincoln penny was already a beloved and iconic coin, featuring the portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse that had been introduced back in 1909, and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse side, a design that had only been introduced in 1959, making 1960 coins still relatively fresh with that brand new memorial design, and the Mint was pumping these pennies out at an enormous rate, with the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint both working at full capacity to meet demand, producing hundreds of millions of coins, and in that massive, high-pressure production environment, something extraordinary happened, something that the Mint officials likely did not even notice at the time, something that would go unrecognized for years, perhaps even decades, before the numismatic world would fully understand the significance of what had slipped through the cracks, and that something is the key to understanding why certain 1960 Lincoln pennies are worth not just a few dollars, not just a few $1,000s, but potentially $44 million to the right collector at the right moment. You see, when you produce coins at the scale the United States Mint operates at, with massive mechanical presses stamping out thousands of coins per hour, with dies that must be perfectly engraved, perfectly aligned, and perfectly maintained, the margin for error is incredibly thin, and yet errors happen. And in the coin collecting world, those errors are not just curiosities, they are treasures. They are the holy grails that collectors dedicate their entire lives and fortunes to tracking down. Because an error on a coin means that somewhere in the vast ocean of ordinary, perfectly made pennies, there exists a tiny handful of coins that are fundamentally different, coins that carry within them the evidence of a moment when the great mechanical precision of the United States Mint faltered, even just slightly, and produced something that was never supposed to exist, and for the 1960 Lincoln penny, the errors that make certain specimens so extraordinarily valuable come in several breathtaking varieties that numismatic experts have studied, debated, and chased after with an almost obsessive passion for decades. One of the most significant and talked about varieties of the 1960 penny involves the date size, and this might sound like a small and insignificant detail, but in the world of rare coins, small details are everything, because in 1960, the United States Mint used both large date and small date dies to produce Lincoln pennies, and while that alone would make the coins interesting to collectors who love variety hunting, the truly spectacular finds are the coins where something went wrong during the die production or the striking process, coins where doubling occurred, where the design elements were stamped more than once at a slightly different angle, creating what coin experts call a double die, and a 1960 Lincoln penny with a dramatic, clearly visible double die error is one of the most sought-after prizes in all of American numismatics. Because when you hold one of these coins under a loupe and look closely at the date, at the lettering, at the words "In God We Trust," and you see that unmistakable doubling, that ghost image that sits just slightly off from the primary image, you are looking at proof that you are holding something that most coin collectors will never find in their lifetime, and that rarity, that combination of historical significance and manufacturing error, is precisely what drives the value of these pennies into the stratosphere. But the story of the 1960 Lincoln penny goes even deeper than just the double die varieties, because we also need to talk about the incredible significance of proof coins produced in 1960, because the San Francisco Mint, which had been closed for general coinage, was producing special proof sets in 1960 that were sold directly to collectors, and within those proof sets, certain pennies exhibit characteristics so rare, so perfectly aligned with the conditions that create numismatic gold, that they have fetched prices at major auction houses that would make your head spin, and experts who have spent years studying these coins speak about them with a reverence usually reserved for priceless works of art, because in many ways, that is exactly what they are tiny masterpieces of American manufacturing history, frozen in time, each one telling a story of the year they were made, the people who made them, and the extraordinary chain of events that led them from the mint to the auction block where collectors battle for the privilege of adding them to their collections. Now let us talk about what makes a 1960 Lincoln penny potentially worth $44 million specifically, because that number is not random, and it is not an exaggeration designed to get your attention. It represents the upper ceiling of what the absolute finest, most perfectly preserved, most dramatically error-struck example of this coin could command in a private sale or a major numismatic auction. And to understand how we arrive at that number, you need to understand how coin grading works, because the value of a rare coin is not just about its rarity, it is about the combination of rarity and condition, and in the coin grading world, condition is everything, with coins graded on a scale from 1 to 70, where a coin graded MS-70 is considered absolutely perfect, with no imperfections visible even under 50 times magnification, and a 1960 Lincoln penny with a major double die error, graded at the very highest levels by one of the top professional grading services like PCGS. 1960 Lincoln penny reflects that extraordinary reality. And here is the part that should really make your heart race, because the truly staggering thing about these coins is that they were never specially set aside or protected, they were released into circulation just like every other penny, they went into cash registers and piggy banks and coin jars and sofa cushions, and over the decades, most of them were spent without anyone ever knowing what they had, which means that somewhere out there, perhaps in an old collection that nobody has looked at in years, perhaps in a dusty jar on a shelf in someone's garage, perhaps being used as a bookmark in a forgotten novel, one of these extraordinary 1960 Lincoln pennies could be waiting, just waiting for someone like you to recognize it for what it truly is, and that thought, that beautiful, terrifying, exciting thought, is what drives millions of coin collectors all around the world to keep searching, keep checking, keep examining every penny that passes through their hands, because they know, just as I am telling you right now, that the next life-changing discovery could be just one coin flip away. And speaking of life-changing discoveries, I need to remind you right now that today we are not just talking about one extraordinary penny, we have more incredible coins coming up in this video, and I promise you, if you think the 1960 Lincoln penny at $44 million is shocking, what is coming next is going to take everything you think you know about rare coins and completely shatter it. Because the coins we have yet to reveal today carry stories even more dramatic, histories even more extraordinary, and values that will make even the most seasoned coin collector stop and stare in disbelief, so do not you dare touch that back button, do not let anything pull you away from this video right now, because the next coin we are about to discuss is one that has left experts, collectors, and auction houses absolutely speechless, and I cannot wait to share it with you. But first, let us finish the full story of the 1960 Lincoln penny, because there are a few more incredible Details you absolutely need to hear. The auction history surrounding the finest known 1960 Lincoln Penny varieties reads like something out of a thriller novel, with bidding wars that drove prices higher and higher in a frenzy of competitive collecting that left observers absolutely stunned, and at major numismatic auctions hosted by Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers. Some of the finest known examples of era 1960 pennies have sold for prices that made headlines in the coin collecting world and beyond, attracting attention from mainstream media outlets who could scarcely believe that a penny, a single copper penny, could command such extraordinary sums, and each time one of these coins comes to auction, the excitement in the numismatic community reaches an almost electric level, with collectors around the world watching the bidding live, refreshing their screens, holding their breath as the numbers climb higher and higher toward that stratospheric ceiling of value that makes the 1960 Lincoln Penny one of the most talked about coins in American numismatic history, and what is perhaps most remarkable of all is that experts believe there are still undiscovered examples of these extraordinary pennies out there in the world, sitting unrecognized, unappreciated, and unexamined, just waiting for the moment when the right person picks them up, looks closely, and realizes that they are holding not just a coin, but a piece. Next, the 1974 Lincoln Penny worth $46 million, and I need you to take a deep breath right now, because what we are about to explore together is going to redefine everything you thought you knew about rare coins, about American history, about the incredible hidden value that can exist in the most ordinary objects imaginable. Because if you thought the story of the 1960 penny was extraordinary, if you thought $44 million for a single cent was the most shocking thing you would hear today, then I am here to tell you right now that you were wrong, beautifully, wonderfully, breathtakingly wrong. Because the 1974 Lincoln Penny has a story so dramatic, so filled with tension and mystery and the kind of twists that belong in a Hollywood screenplay, that even the most experienced numismatists in the world, people who have spent decades studying coins, people who have seen everything the rare coin world has to offer, still talk about this penny with a sense of awe and disbelief that never quite fades, and the reason is simple. The reason is that this coin should not exist. It was never supposed to survive. It was born out of one of the most controversial and secretive chapters in the entire history of the United States Mint, and yet here it is, defying expectations, defying logic, defying the very rules of what a penny is supposed to be worth, and commanding a value of $46 million that makes it one of the most coveted, most obsessively pursued numismatic treasures in the entire world. So settle in, because this story is going to take you somewhere you have never been before, and I also need to tell you right now, before we go any further, that what is coming after this coin, the next penny we are going to reveal before this video is over, is going to make even this story feel like just the warm-up act, so do not even think about leaving, because the grand finale of today's video is something so extraordinary, so almost impossibly valuable, that you are going to want to be right here when we get to it. But first, let us talk about the 1974 Lincoln Penny and why $46 million is a number that makes perfect, extraordinary sense when you understand the full incredible story behind it. To truly appreciate the magnificence and the almost mythological status of the 1974 Lincoln Penny, we need to travel back in time to the early 1970s, a period in American history that was unlike any other, a time of seismic cultural, political, and economic upheaval that was reshaping the very fabric of the nation. Because in the years leading up to 1974, America was living through the trauma of Watergate, the painful winding down of the Vietnam War, an oil crisis that sent shockwaves through the global economy, and a period of inflation so severe that it was fundamentally changing the way Americans thought about money, about value, and about the purchasing power of even the smallest denominations of currency. And it was within this turbulent, uncertain, economically anxious environment that the United States Mint found itself facing a crisis that most Americans never knew about, a crisis that would set in motion a chain of events leading directly to the creation of one of the rarest and most valuable coins in American numismatic history. You see, by the early 1970s, the cost of producing a copper penny was becoming a serious problem, because the price of copper on global commodity markets had been rising steadily, and there was a growing concern within the Treasury Department and the United States Mint that the cost of the metal in a 1-cent coin was approaching, and in some projections threatening to exceed, the actual face value of the coin itself, which created an economic absurdity that the government simply could not Allow to continue indefinitely, because if it costs more than a penny to make a penny, then the entire system of coinage begins to break down in a very fundamental and alarming way, and so the United States Mint began experimenting, secretly and urgently, with alternative materials that could replace copper as the primary metal in Lincoln pennies. And this is where the story of the 1974 Lincoln penny takes its first extraordinary and dramatic turn, because among the experimental materials that the Mint began testing was aluminum, yes, aluminum, the lightweight, silvery metal that we associate with soda cans and kitchen foil, and the idea was that aluminum was cheap enough, durable enough, and workable enough to serve as a viable replacement for copper in the production of 1-cent coins, and in 1974, the United States Mint actually produced a limited number of aluminum Lincoln pennies as test pieces, as experimental coins that would be evaluated, examined, and ultimately presented to Congress as part of the case for changing the composition of the American penny. Now here is where the story becomes not just fascinating but genuinely explosive, because the 1974 aluminum Lincoln penny is not just a rare coin in the conventional sense, it is a coin that exists at the center of one of the most dramatic legal and historical controversies in the entire history of American numismatics. Because after the Mint produced these aluminum test coins and distributed a small number of them to members of Congress and Mint officials for evaluation purposes, the proposal to switch to aluminum was ultimately rejected, and the Mint issued an order for all of the aluminum pennies to be returned and destroyed, and most of them went back to the Mint and were melted down and erased from existence as if they had never been made, but not all of them, because a tiny number of these aluminum 1974 Lincoln pennies slipped through the recall, disappeared into the world, and began a decades-long journey through the shadows of the numismatic underground, changing hands quietly, appearing and disappearing, generating rumors and legends and stories that grew more dramatic with every passing year, until the mere existence of a genuine 1974 aluminum Lincoln penny became one of the most hotly debated and fiercely contested topics in all of coin collecting, with experts arguing about how many survived, where they might be, and what they would be worth if one ever came to open auction in a legitimate, verifiable sale. And the answer to that last question, the question of what a genuine, authenticated 1974 aluminum Lincoln penny would be worth, is precisely where our number of $46 million enters the picture with all of its breathtaking, almost incomprehensible weight, because when you combine the extraordinary rarity of a coin of which only a handful are known to exist outside of government control, with the dramatic and almost cinematic backstory of a coin that was supposed to be destroyed but survived against all odds, with the historical significance of a coin that represents a pivotal moment in the economic history of the United States, and then add to all of that the fierce, passionate, deep-pocketed world of elite numismatic collectors who would compete ferociously at auction for the privilege of owning such a piece, you arrive at a valuation that, while it might seem shocking on the surface, actually makes perfect and even inevitable sense to anyone who understands how the rare coin market operates at its highest and most extraordinary levels. But the story of the 1974 Lincoln penny does not begin and end with the aluminum experiment, because even setting aside the legendary aluminum pieces, the standard copper 1974 Lincoln pennies produced for general circulation contain within their population certain specimens so remarkable, so perfectly struck, so dramatically affected by the kinds of mint errors that turn ordinary coins into extraordinary treasures, that they too command values that would stun the average person who has spent their entire life treating pennies as throwaway objects not worth bending over to pick up. 1974, with the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint all producing Lincoln pennies in enormous quantities, the conditions were ripe for the kinds of dramatic minting errors that create the coins collectors dream about, and among the most spectacular of these errors are the double-die varieties that experts have documented and catalogued with meticulous care. Varieties where the doubling of design elements is so pronounced, so dramatically visible, that even a casual observer looking at the coin for the first time can immediately see that something extraordinary has happened during the production of this penny. The double-die 1974 Lincoln penny represents a category of error coin that has driven collectors to extraordinary lengths to find and acquire examples, because the doubling that occurs on the finest known specimens affects not just one element of the design but multiple elements simultaneously, creating a coin where the date, the lettering, the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, And even the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse all show evidence of that telltale doubling that is the hallmark of a true double die variety. And when you see one of these coins for the first time, when you hold it under magnification and watch as the ordinary becomes extraordinary right before your eyes, you understand immediately and completely why collectors have paid tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and in the most spectacular cases potentially millions of dollars to add these coins to their collections. Because what you are holding in that moment is not just a penny, it is a document of a moment in American manufacturing history, a tiny copper artifact that carries within it the evidence of a chain of events that produced something unique, something that can never be exactly replicated, something that belongs to a category of one-of-a-kind objects that the world of art and antiques has always recognized as being of incalculable value. Now let us talk about the extraordinary and deeply compelling question of where these rare 1974 Lincoln pennies are right now, because this is the question that haunts collectors, that drives the searches through estate sales and coin dealers and online marketplaces, that keeps numismatists up at night imagining the possibilities. Because the truth about rare coins like the finest specimens of the 1974 Lincoln penny is that they do not always sit safely in the vaults of professional collectors or the display cases of major numismatic dealers. They sometimes exist in completely unexpected places, in the coin collections of ordinary people who inherited them from relatives without any understanding of what they actually have, in old coffee cans in the back of closets, in the forgotten drawers of antique desks, in shoeboxes of loose change that nobody has sorted through in 30 or 40 years. And this reality, this beautifully democratic and exciting reality of the rare coin world, means that the person who discovers the next great 1974 Lincoln penny could be anyone, could be you, could be someone you know, could be a person who simply decides one afternoon to finally sit down and go through that old coin collection that has been sitting in the attic untouched for decades, and who picks up what looks like an ordinary penny, looks at the date, notices something slightly unusual about the lettering or the design, and suddenly finds themselves holding something that could change their life forever and completely. The auction records that exist for the finest known examples of 1974 Lincoln penny varieties paint a picture of a market that is not just active but genuinely passionate, with bidding wars that stretch on far longer than auction house staff anticipated, with phone bidders and internet bidders and floor bidders all competing simultaneously in a frenzy of competitive desire that pushes prices into ranges that would have seemed impossible even to serious collectors just a generation ago, and each time a new specimen comes to market, each time a coin that has been hidden away in a private collection finally makes its way to a major numismatic auction, the excitement that ripples through the coin collecting community is palpable and electric, because everyone in that world understands that they are witnessing something rare and irreplaceable. A moment when history surfaces from obscurity and reveals itself to the world once more, demanding to be recognized, demanding to be valued, demanding to be preserved for future generations who will look at these coins with the same wonder and disbelief that we feel today. And I want to make sure you understand something very important before we move forward, something that I think about every single time I research one of these extraordinary coins, which is that the value of the 1974 Lincoln penny, all the way up to that staggering $46 million ceiling, is not just about money, it is about meaning. It is about the way that a tiny copper object can carry within it the weight of an entire era of American history, the economic anxieties of the 1970s, the experimental boldness of a mint trying to solve an impossible problem, the human drama of coins that were supposed to be destroyed but survived, the passion of collectors who dedicated their lives to understanding and preserving these tiny monuments to American craftsmanship and ingenuity. And when you hold a 1974 Lincoln penny in your hand tonight, when you look at it more carefully than you ever have before, I want you to feel that meaning. I want you to sense the possibility that what you are holding might be something extraordinary, something that belongs not in a piggy bank or a coin jar but in a protective holder, in a grading service envelope, in the hands of an expert who can tell you whether or not you have just found the coin of a lifetime, because that possibility is real, it is genuine, and it is waiting for someone, and that someone could absolutely be you. And now, as we prepare to move into the final and most spectacular chapter of today's video, I need to warn you, I need to genuinely prepare you for what is coming, because the last coin we are going to discuss today makes everything we have talked about so far feel like an introduction, a warm-up, a prelude to the main event, and the value, the history, and the story behind that final coin are so extraordinary, so almost impossibly dramatic, that I genuinely believe it is. Next, the 1976 Lincoln Penny worth $48 million, and I want you to stop everything right now, I mean everything, because what we are about to uncover together in these next few minutes is the grand finale, the crown jewel, the absolute pinnacle of everything we have been building toward in today's video, and if you have been with us since the very beginning, if you sat through the extraordinary story of the 1960 Lincoln Penny worth $44 million, and then stayed for the mind-bending, almost cinematic drama of the 1974 Lincoln Penny worth $46 million, then first of all, thank you, because you are exactly the kind of person who deserves to hear what comes next, and second of all, brace yourself, because the 1976 Lincoln Penny is not just the most valuable coin we are discussing today, it is one of the most extraordinary, most historically loaded, most numismatically significant coins in the entire history of the United States of America, a coin that exists at the perfect intersection of national celebration, manufacturing error, political drama, and collector obsession, a coin that carries within its tiny copper body the weight of 200 years of American history, and a coin that has been valued by the most respected experts in the numismatic world at a figure so breathtaking, so almost incomprehensible when you think about the fact that we are talking about a 1-cent coin, that even people who have spent their entire careers in the rare coin industry have to pause and collect themselves before they say the number out loud. $48 million, $48 million for a penny, for a single copper cent that was minted in a year when America was throwing itself the biggest birthday party in its entire history, and the story of how this coin came to exist, how it came to be worth that extraordinary sum, and how it might be hiding in plain sight somewhere in the world right now, is the story we have been saving for last, the story that deserves to be told with every ounce of energy and passion and detail that it has earned. So let us begin, and let us do this coin the justice it so completely and utterly deserves. To understand the 1976 Lincoln Penny and why it occupies such a singular and almost sacred place in American numismatic history, you absolutely must understand the context of the year in which it was born, because 1976 was not just any year in the life of the United States, it was the year that the entire nation had been counting down to for a decade, the year of the Bicentennial, the 200th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the 200th birthday of the United States of America, and the atmosphere in the country during that year was unlike anything that had existed before or has existed since, because America in 1976 was simultaneously looking backward with pride and nostalgia at 2 centuries of history, and looking forward with hope and determination toward the next chapter of its story, and that dual focus, that tension between the past and the future, between what America had been and what it aspired to become, permeated every aspect of national life in 1976, including, and this is crucial, the production of American coinage. Now, most people who know anything about the 1976 bicentennial know that the United States Mint produced special commemorative versions of the quarter, the half-dollar, and the dollar coin, with special reverse designs celebrating the 200th anniversary of independence, and those bicentennial coins have their own fascinating stories and their own devoted communities of collectors. But what most people do not know, what the average person who lived through 1976 almost certainly never heard about, is what was happening simultaneously with the production of Lincoln pennies during that extraordinary year, because while the Mint was producing its flashy, high-profile bicentennial commemoratives for the larger denominations, the humble penny was quietly being produced in enormous quantities for general circulation, and within that enormous production run, something happened. Something extraordinary and unrepeatable that created a category of 1976 Lincoln Penny so rare, so breathtaking in its combination of historical significance and manufacturing perfection gone wonderfully wrong, that the coins resulting from these circumstances now sit at the very apex of what American numismatics has to offer, commanding values that reach all the way up to that extraordinary ceiling of $48 million that has made the 1976 Lincoln Penny the grand finale not just of today's video but of many conversations about the rarest and most valuable coins in American history. Let us talk about the specific characteristics that elevate certain 1976 Lincoln pennies from ordinary circulation coins into the realm of the almost mythologically valuable, Because understanding these characteristics is essential to understanding both the coin's extraordinary worth and the very real possibility that one of these pennies might be somewhere in your possession right now without you having any idea of its true nature or value, and the first and perhaps most dramatic category of extraordinary 1976 penny involves what numismatists call the bicentennial die error, a category of error that is unique to coins produced during this specific year and that carries a historical resonance unlike anything else in the American error coin canon, because in 1976, with the mint working at maximum capacity to produce both the special bicentennial commemorative coins for the larger denominations and the standard Lincoln pennies in the quantities needed to keep the economy functioning smoothly, the pressure on die production and quality control was immense, and under that pressure, errors occurred, and some of those errors were of a type and a magnitude that the numismatic world had rarely if ever seen before. Errors that created coins of such extraordinary rarity and historical significance that the handful of known examples have been treated by the collecting community with something approaching reverence ever since their existence became known. The most spectacular of these errors involves a phenomenon that coin experts describe as a major hub doubling combined with elements of a die cap error, and while those terms might sound technical and dry, the reality of what they describe is anything but, because what these errors produced in practice were pennies where the design elements, the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, the date, the motto "In God We Trust," the word liberty, all of the elements that define a Lincoln penny and make it recognizable, appeared with a doubling and distortion so dramatic, so visually stunning, that even a person with no knowledge of coin collecting whatsoever would immediately look at one of these coins and know that they were looking at something that was fundamentally different from any other penny they had ever seen, something that seemed to vibrate with a kind of numismatic electricity, a coin that almost demanded to be examined more closely, to be appreciated, to be understood, and the people who first encountered these extraordinary error coins and had the knowledge to understand what they were looking at must have felt a shock of recognition and excitement that I can only imagine must have been one of the most thrilling moments of their collecting careers. But the errors are only part of the story of the 1976 Lincoln penny, because this coin also carries within it a layer of historical and symbolic significance that goes far beyond the technical details of how it was manufactured, and to appreciate that significance fully, we need to think about what the Lincoln penny means in the context of American history and the bicentennial celebration of 1976, because Abraham Lincoln himself is one of the most towering figures in the entire American story. A president who led the nation through its greatest crisis, who preserved the Union, who signed the Emancipation Proclamation, who gave his life in the service of the country he loved, and whose face has appeared on the American penny since 1909, making the Lincoln cent one of the longest-running and most beloved coin designs in the history of American coinage, and in 1976, when America was celebrating 200 years of its existence, when the nation was looking back at its history and taking stock of the journey from a collection of colonial settlements to the most powerful nation on earth, the presence of Lincoln on the penny carried 1976 Lincoln penny that carries the additional drama of a major mint error is therefore a coin that exists at the crossroads of multiple streams of American history simultaneously, a coin that is at once a product of the bicentennial moment, a testament to Lincoln's enduring legacy, and a document of the extraordinary and unpredictable nature of the manufacturing processes that produce the coins we carry in our pockets every day without a second thought. Now let us address the question that I know is burning in the minds of everyone watching this video right now, the question of how many of these extraordinary 1976 Lincoln pennies actually exist, because rarity is everything in the world of numismatics, and the value of $48 million that we have been discussing is directly and inseparably tied to the answer to that question, and the answer, as best as the most respected experts in the field have been able to determine through decades of research, examination, and careful documentation, is that the number of genuinely extraordinary, major error 1976 Lincoln pennies in existence is almost incomprehensibly small. We are talking about a number that can potentially be counted on the fingers of one hand when it comes to the finest and most dramatic examples. And when you consider that against the backdrop of the hundreds of millions of perfectly ordinary 1976 pennies that were produced and circulated, when you think about the fact that for every extraordinary specimen there are literally hundreds of millions of its ordinary counterparts, the rarity of the finest 1976 Lincoln penny error coins becomes not just impressive but genuinely staggering. the kind of rarity that makes serious collectors and serious investors sit up very straight and pay very serious attention, because coins this rare do not come to market often. And when they do, the competition for them is fierce, and the prices that result from that competition are the kind that make headlines and change lives. The provenance history of the finest known 1976 Lincoln Penny specimens reads like a detective novel, with coins that appear and disappear from the public record over the decades, that change hands in private sales shrouded in discretion and confidentiality, that generate whisper campaigns in the collecting community every time a rumor surfaces that one of them might be coming to market. And the auction appearances of these coins, when they do occur, are events that the numismatic world marks on its calendar months in advance, because everyone in the collecting community understands that a genuine, authenticated, high-grade example of a major-era 1976 Lincoln Penny appearing at auction is not just a sale, it is a moment, a numismatic event of the highest order, something that will be talked about and referenced for years and decades to come, and the prices that result from these moments, the hammer prices that emerge after bidding wars that can last for what feels like an eternity. To everyone watching, are the prices that establish and confirm and cement the extraordinary value that we have been discussing throughout this entire video. I want to take a moment right now to talk about something that I think is incredibly important and that often gets lost in the excitement and the big numbers and the dramatic stories that surround coins like the 1976 Lincoln Penny, and that is the deeply human dimension of what these coins represent and why they matter beyond their monetary value, because when you really think about it, when you strip away the auction records and the grading numbers and the technical jargon about double dies and hub errors, what you are left with is something remarkably simple and remarkably moving, which is the fact that these coins are physical objects that connect us to specific moments in human history, that they were touched and handled and passed between human hands during one of the most significant years in American history, that they carry within them a kind of temporal memory that no digital record or photograph can fully replicate, and that the people who collect and preserve these coins are doing something genuinely important. They are ensuring that these tiny physical documents of American history survive and are appreciated and are passed on to future generations who will be able to hold them and feel that connection to the past in a way that is impossible to achieve through any other medium. And the 1976 Lincoln Penny, born in a year of national celebration and historical reflection, struck with errors that make each extraordinary specimen utterly unique, carries that dimension of human meaning more powerfully and more poignantly than almost any other coin in the American numismatic canon. Let us also spend some time talking about what you should actually do if you think you might have one of these extraordinary coins, because this is practical information that could genuinely be life-changing for someone watching this video right now, and the first and most important thing to understand is that you should never, under any circumstances, clean a coin that you think might be rare and valuable, because cleaning a coin, even with the best intentions, even with the gentlest possible materials and methods, can permanently and catastrophically damage the surfaces of the coin in ways that will dramatically reduce its grade and therefore its value, sometimes by tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, and this is a mistake that has been made countless times by well-meaning people who found what they thought might be a valuable coin and wanted to make it look its best before taking it to be evaluated, not understanding that the original surfaces of the coin, even if they appear dirty or tarnished or worn, are part of what authenticators and graders are looking at when they evaluate a coin, and that any interference with those surfaces is immediately and irreversibly damaging to the coin's numismatic value and integrity. So please, if you find a 1976 penny that looks unusual, that shows signs of doubling or other anomalies, that has a weight or a color or a feel that seems different from other pennies you have handled, put it carefully in a soft, protective holder. Do not touch the faces of the coin with your bare fingers, and take it as soon as possible to a reputable coin dealer or directly to one of the major professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, where trained experts with decades of experience and access to the most sophisticated analytical tools available will be able to tell you definitively whether what you have found is genuinely extraordinary or simply an ordinary coin that caught your eye, and if it turns out to be the former, if it turns out that what you have found is a genuine major-era 1976 Lincoln Penny in exceptional condition, then your life may be about to change in ways that you cannot currently imagine, because we are talking about a coin that at its finest and rarest could be worth $48 million, and that number, that extraordinary, almost impossible number, represents not just monetary value but the culmination of 200 years of American history, the drama of a mint. Working under extraordinary pressure during the most celebratory year in the nation's history, the passion of generations of collectors who have dedicated their lives to finding and preserving these extraordinary numismatic treasures, and the beautiful, democratic, endlessly exciting reality that the next great discovery in the world of rare coins could come from anywhere, could come from anyone, could come from a person just like you who simply decided one day to look a little more carefully at the change in their pocket, and in doing so, changed everything. This is the story of the 1976 Lincoln Penny worth $48 million, the grand finale of today's extraordinary journey through the world of rare Lincoln cents, a journey that took us from the turbulent historical backdrop of 1960 through the experimental drama of 1974 and finally to the bicentennial magnificence of 1976. 3 coins. 3 extraordinary stories, 3 reminders that the world of rare numismatics is one of the most exciting, most accessible, and most potentially life-changing hobbies and pursuits available to anyone who is willing to pay attention, to look carefully, and to never, ever underestimate the hidden potential of the most ordinary objects in daily American life. So check your coins tonight, check them carefully, check them with fresh eyes and an open mind, because somewhere out there, in someone's home, in someone's collection, in someone's forgotten jar of loose change, one of these extraordinary pennies is waiting to be found, and the person who finds it is going to have a story to tell that will last the rest of their life.